morning. Good morning. Welcome to the First Universalist Church of Rochester, where we are called to nurture the Spirit and serve the community. I am Peter House, your summer minister, and leading worship with us today are Dolores Dalamba, she, her, our worship associate, Aaron Selitsky on the organ. So this font is a little small for me. I'm supposed to wear bifocals and I don't. So let's start again. Anton Selitsky on the organ with our music. Oliver Annon, he, him with tech support. Karen Labreco, she, her as our grusher. And on our online coffee hour, Carol Williams, she, her, and Lily Thatcher providing childcare. So some of you may have noticed that our summer services have shifted to 10 o'clock a.m. And if you would like to find a way to support our summer services, please sign up to host Coffee Hour one of the Sundays. It is such an important ministry to support this welcome in the summer. See your order of service for instructions. If you are here for the very first time this morning, we especially welcome you. Thank you for making it to this worshiping community. We have a visitors forum that can be found in the chat for our folks online and can be accessed by scanning a QR code in your pews or on the back of your order of service. Please fill out the form so that we can offer you a welcome beyond this worship service. Before we take a moment to turn to our neighbor, let us take a moment to turn towards the camera and greet our online worshiping community. If you are online, please pop into the chat and offer a greeting. To our online community, please wait to share joys and concerns until later in the service so that they'll be visible to those here in the sanctuary. If you are here at First Universalist now, let us take a moment to turn to our neighbor this morning and offer a greeting.
Good morning. Can you hear me? No, he's all right. Oh, you said I didn't. You are? I'm okay now. You're always okay. All right, I'd like to share with you.
I think you need to speak closer to your mouth.
Speak closer to this? Okay, well, why don't I do this until it's time for the book? All right. Good. I'd like to share with you words of Sue Eyre. Spirit of life and love, We have gathered here in search of answers to hard questions. We have come in search of understanding, in search of community. We have come in search of hope and healing. Let this be a place not only of searching, but of discovery. Let this be a place not only of learning, but of wisdom. Let this be a place not only of meeting, but of connection. And let this be a place where healing fosters giving and hope fosters service. This is our prayer, that we may create here a circle of love, ever expanding, ever growing, as we seek to know you, the source of our being. Come, let us worship together. And as Robert Remley lights our chalice at First Universalist Church, and you light a chalice in your own homes, will you join me in saying our chalice words in unison? May we be a people of welcome, here to grow in heart and mind and spirit, and may we reach out to serve our community. Please rise in body or spirit and join me in our affirmation of faith, followed by our sung offering. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve humanity in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the source and meaning of life. Thus we covenant with each other and with all. Our church is here to serve our community. We ask that you continue your generous support of these efforts as we join together in our ritual of shared commitment. This morning's offering will now be gratefully received. You who are here in person are invited to drop an offering in the offering basket. And if you are a visitor, please feel free to let the basket pass. You are invited to give online by scanning the QR code on the back of your order of service. For folks online, please click the link in the chat to give to First Universalist Church. Thank you for your generosity. Guess what? Ooh. It's either too much or too little. But it's story time. And this is the first time we're doing stories in the summer to welcome the children so they feel they have a place in the service, but I don't see any children. So maybe they're upstairs already. But there are those of you who are still young at heart, and this story is one that we all need to remember all our lives. And it's called I'm Sorry. Flamingo, are you okay? Potato hurt my feelings. Oh no, but you and Potato are such good friends. What happened? We were having fun playing superheroes, but then he said something really mean. Oh, Flamingo, I'll go talk to him. Hi, Potato. It's not my fault. Whose fault is it when you say mean things? Mine, it's all my fault. Oh, Potato. Flamingo will never want to be my friend ever again. I feel terrible. I think I know what would help. A sandwich? That's a good idea. No, not a sandwich. An apology. You want me to tell Flamingo I'm sorry? Uh-huh. What if instead I run away to the South Pole to live with penguins? I don't think that would help. Or what if I put on a disguise and we can all pretend I'm somebody else? I don't think that would help either, Potato. Oh, what if I give Flamingo all of my money? No. Good, because I don't have any money. Potato, you have to tell Flamingo you're sorry. But that's so hard. Saying I'm sorry is maybe the hardest thing to say in the entire world, even harder than saying solanum tuberosum. Potato, that's a fancy way of saying potato. Potato, do you feel sorry? The sorriest. And you know what you did was wrong. The wrongiest. Then you already did the hard part. Now you just have to tell Flamingo. Well, howdy, partners. Mind if I play with you cowpokes? I know it's you, Potato. Oh. Don't you have something to say? Yes, I do. Flamingo, I just want to say, yes, that I was only joking and it wasn't my fault. And Potato, and I'm sorry. You really hurt my feelings. I know. I'm sorry. And I still feel pretty upset. I'm so sorry. I feel really bad about it, and I know there's nothing I can do to take it back. But I hope one day we can be friends again. Guess I'll just take my really cool cowboy costume and go. Potato, it might be nice if we had somebody else to play with. Me! And it might be nice if I had a hug from my friend. Me? I'm so sorry. Friends? Friends. See? That wasn't so hard, was it? It was really hard, but it was so worth it. And that's the end of our story.
I invite you now into this reverent time of sharing the joys and sorrows of our gathered community. If you would like, you can place your hand over your heart to be able to listen from a heart-centered place. As Dolores places stones in the bowl, I will read aloud the joys and sorrows of our gathered community. All online are also invited to share your joys and sorrows in the chat. A joy from Johanna Connolly. I spent last weekend thinking my little dog Duke was going to die. Something very mysterious. But after 3 vet visits, x-rays, shots, and medicine, he has gotten well. I am so, so grateful. A sorrow from Beth Ayers. My friend's son, Wilson Jr., age 17, was laid to rest yesterday. He had jumped off the canal bridge in Newark and drowned. There is a great deal of support and love from the community. A joy from Kitty Forbush. Lisa Gwinner had her neck surgery this past Tuesday, and it was very successful. She's coming home tomorrow. If we want to just take a moment to watch what's scrolling by on the screens. We hold this morning that this church is a worshiping community that is meeting in a time of war. We acknowledge the wars and conflicts that are happening in Israel, Palestine, Ukraine, the Congo, and Sudan. We acknowledge that there are more conflicts and wars happening that we may not even be aware of. We earnestly pray for these wars to cease. We light a white candle to acknowledge the grief we feel in this sanctuary and wherever we are worshiping from. Let us all be connected by our grief. We light a yellow candle to acknowledge the joy, the resilience, the tenacity found in life that still makes life worth living. Let us be connected by joy to those living through the direct impact and loss while at war in their homes, in their backyards, and in their country. We will hold a brief moment of silence to honor the many deaths that have happened this past week due to wars across our world. And we drop one final stone in the bowl to represent all the joys and sorrows left unspoken in the silent sanctuaries of our hearts. May all be held in the heart of love. I invite you now to join with me in a spirit of prayer and meditation. Do not leave your cares at the door. Do not leave there your pain, your sorrow, or your joys. Bring them with you into this place of acceptance and forgiveness. Place them on the common altar of life and offer them to the possibility of your worship. Come then and offer yourself to potential transformation by the creative process that flows through you, through all of us, together here in this sanctuary this morning and all over the world, and indeed through all of life. Amen. Blessed be. May it be so. At one point, I wanted to go into TV journalism, and since we've started all this Zooming and the script and all that, I feel like I'm getting a little taste of what that would have been like. It's kind of fun. So if you've known me for a while, hopefully you know I am not one to brag. So I rarely talk about this. But I came into an unexpected inheritance in 1991. When my paternal grandmother died that year, it never even crossed my mind that I would inherit anything. So I was surprised to learn that I was in line to inherit $327. $327 whole unexpected dollars. What a windfall. And I mean, it really was at the time. What would I do with that money? The possibilities were endless. A new winter jacket, maybe a new pair of shoes, a rug to cover my bare living room floor, or maybe put it toward my student loan payments. Or should I save it, invest it? Who knows? I was only 28 at the time. That money could grow to $3,000 or $4,000 by the time I retired. I ended up paying a heavy price, a very high price for this inheritance. A high enough price that if I had to do it over again, I don't think I would have accepted it at all. My grandmother was poor by anyone's measure. She and my grandfather never owned a home. They never had a car that wasn't at least 7 years old when they bought it. I never got a gift from them that wasn't either handmade by my grandmother or bought at the dollar store. They rented this tiny, tiny little apartment in a very rundown house. They hung the tea bags up to dry so that they could be used again. I can still picture them hanging above the sink. And when they made their annual road trip to Erie, Pennsylvania to visit their friends, they would take their belongings in boxes and paper bags. My grandfather worked on a loading dock until he had a heart attack at the age of 74. And after he died, my grandmother lived, like many people, completely and entirely on Social Security. She never had a will. I guess she thought that she didn't need one since she didn't really have anything of monetary value to leave anyone. But after she died, it was revealed that she had $3,000 in the bank. My father died when he was only 43, so his parents outlived him by many years. And since there was no will, my sisters and I were legally entitled to half of my grandmother's estate, and then the other half went to my father's only sister. And this, as many people are already predicting probably in their minds, is when the drama began. How many of us have had drama over a family estate? So my sisters and I had always had a cordial but not especially close relationship with my Aunt Judy. Like my grandparents, she struggled financially and she could have used the money. And when we first got letters from the lawyer telling us that we were entitled to half of the money in my grandmother's bank account, we all said that we felt Aunt Judy should get it all. After all, she was my grandmother's only living child. She was my grandmother's primary support person, and she could certainly use the money. We told Aunt Judy that all we wanted was a chance to look through my grandmother's things and choose a few sentimental items to remember my grandparents by. As I have said, they didn't have anything of any monetary value, but I do have to say this. Grandma Carrie was the kitsch queen. You've never seen anything like it. Every corner of that ratty little apartment was filled to the brim with dime store knickknacks and prints of Paris street scenes and plastic frames and artificial flower arrangements and artificial flower wreaths. There wasn't a surface that she didn't decorate, or really, in fact, that she didn't over-decorate. To give you kind of an idea, one time my cousin Laura and I were in Woolworths at Christmas time, and Laura looked around at all the chintzy, kitschy, tacky decorations and turned to me and said, "I feel like I just died and went to Grandma Carrie heaven." So there was certainly more than enough schlock to go around. My Aunt Judy and each of Grandma Carrie's 7 grandchildren could easily have filled 2 boxes worth full of stuff, and there still would have been enough left over to make a big donation to Goodwill. There were 2 things that I wanted. One was a framed 1950s picture from a calendar of Hoops Park, which is Auburn's prettiest park, with a little skating rink and a little gazebo. And I also wanted a little tiny set of miniature salt and pepper shakers that my father had gotten when he was 5 years old for 5 cents at the 5 and dime store and given to Grandma Carrie for Mother's Day. So I reminded Aunt Judy several times that I wanted these 2 items, and every time I reminded her, she promised that she would put them aside. My sister wanted a collection of letters that my father had written to Grandma Carrie when he was in the Korean War. Grandma Carrie had showed us these letters many, many times. Like a lot of people did, she kept them in a bundle tied with a ribbon in her cedar chest at the foot of her bed. Now, these were especially precious because, as I said, my father had already died and predeceased his parents by many years. So Aunt Judy promised that she would set those letters aside as well. But what we really all wanted the most was just one last chance to see the tiny little apartment that my grandparents had lived in since the 1960s. That impossibly cramped little space where Grandma Carrie nonetheless managed to squeeze 16 or 17 people into one room every Christmas for brunch, and still found space to put up a full-sized artificial Christmas tree. And then she would hand out, and I'm not exaggerating, probably 25 presents per person. All of them tiny little dime store objects wrapped up like Christmas gifts, like a roll of Tootsie Rolls or a roll of Lifesavers or one single pencil, but she would wrap them all up and put little tags on them and bows on them, and it took probably an hour for her to hand them all out. So my sisters and I were hoping for one last opportunity to see the decrepit little space the way that our grandmother had left it, plastic flower arrangements and all. We checked several times with Aunt Judy to see when we were going to get around to cleaning out the apartment, and we wanted to offer our help with the job when the time came. And each time she promised she'd keep us informed. And then one day, my sister Joan called Aunt Judy to ask again when she thought we could visit and see the apartment. "Oh, that's all done, dear," Aunt Judy said. "My kids and I cleaned out the apartment last week. It's all clean, everything's gone, and we gave the keys back to the landlord." My sister was stunned. "But we had wanted some things," she said to Aunt Judy. "Oh, don't worry, dear," Aunt Judy assured her. "I set all of those things aside for you." So this was a few weeks before Christmas. And on Christmas Eve, my cousins came to a gathering at my mother's house with one fairly small box from Aunt Judy. And in the box were some pictures of my father at various stages of his life, his yearbook and his diplomas, some cards that he had made for Grandma Carrie when he was little. Actually, my favorite one was, "Happy Mother's Day, Mother. Love, your child, George House." So that was in the box. And then there was one cat knickknack that my mother had bought for Grandma Carrie the year that my parents were engaged. And that was it. That was all that was in the box. There was no framed picture of Hoops Park, no letters from Korea, no salt and pepper shakers, and none of the other sentimental things that we had requested either. The box only contained items, it seemed to us at the time, the items that Aunt Judy decided that we could have, with no apparent consideration given at all to any of the requests that we had made. So my sisters and I were disappointed, and then we were angry. What right did she have to make this decision for us? After all, we had just as much legal right to decide how to distribute these things as she did. The law was on our side. Because my grandmother had died without a will, and because my father had predeceased her, as his children, we were legally entitled to half of her estate, which I've already described was very large. We didn't say anything, though. We didn't want to make waves. We didn't want to cause a family rift. But then, a few weeks after this happened with the box, we got a letter from my father's cousin, who was a lawyer. And he contacted us to let us know that Grandma Carrie had $3,000 in a bank account and that we were legally entitled to half of it. As luck would have it, my sister ran into Aunt Judy the next day at the grocery store. She asked Aunt Judy about the letter and was told that there was a bank account, but it was essentially empty and maybe had a few $100s in it, but certainly nowhere near the $3,000 that the letter said. She also said that there were debts that exceeded the amount that was in the bank account, and so what we should do is simply sign away our claim so that that estate could be closed as soon as possible. Well, we double-checked with the lawyer, and we confirmed that there was indeed, I found the letter when I was researching this, $3,116 in the bank account, and that all the debts had been paid. So we were entitled to $1,558 split three ways, minus his fee, of course, for a grand total of $327 each. Well, we had initially decided that Aunt Judy should get it all, but now we were angry at what we had perceived as the unjust treatment that we had received. First with the apartment, and now with this apparent deception over the bank account. So we decided that we would show Aunt Judy we wanted our $327. Well, as you can all predict, I'm sure, this situation ended up causing the very rift that my sisters and I were initially committed to avoiding. Aunt Judy was hurt and angry, and her 4 children were furiously defensive of their mother, who they saw as having been wronged by us. And so they ceased all contact with us as well. A few months later, I sent Aunt Judy a letter in which I clearly outlined why we were upset and why we had made the decision to take our share of the money. I tried really hard to keep the tone neutral and to not snipe or accuse, but simply use I statements to let her know how I felt. You see, I was enrolled in the Masters in Counseling program at SUNY Brockport at the time, and we were really big on I statements. I even had a few people read the letter ahead of time to make sure that it wasn't inflammatory, and I was assured by everyone that it wasn't. I naively hoped that if she understood our perspective and acknowledged her role in the situation, that we could mend our fences. Keep in mind, I was 28 at the time. Instead, she responded with an angry, grievance-filled letter which cataloged in great detail every perceived slight and misstep my mother and my sisters and I had ever made. She accused me of not having sufficiently loved my grandmother, and then she used the ultimate trump card in her arsenal, the one that you can always use when someone has a dead parent. She claimed that my long-deceased father would be ashamed of the letter I had written her and ashamed of the person that I had become. Well, as far as I was concerned, that sealed the deal. I was done. I had been the injured party. I had made a clean and honest attempt to set things right, and my effort had been met with spite and vitriol. I was done. I wouldn't respond in kind at all. I just would not respond at all. And I didn't for 19 years. Now, every so often, every once in a while, I would start to feel bad and I would consider reaching out to Aunt Judy. But every single time I considered doing this, I was stopped by another, more powerful thought. I couldn't bring myself to reach out until Aunt Judy was willing to acknowledge her own role in our rift. She needed to take accountability. And periodically, I would hear from extended family members that Aunt Judy was indeed still angry and still blamed us for the problem. She believed that I had treated her unfairly, and she still felt that she had done nothing wrong. So when I would hear that, of course, I continued my resolve that I was not going to be the one to reach out. 1991 was a long time ago. I have seen a lot more of life since then. And I have come to appreciate many, many things that I couldn't see back then. And my biggest insight, ironically, it came to me when I was visiting another aunt, my Aunt Jean, my mother's sister. Now, I knew my Aunt Jean far better than I ever knew Aunt Judy, and I had a much closer relationship with her. But I didn't know her as well as I thought I did either. And it was actually a single snapshot that completely changed my perspective, not only on Aunt Jean, but on everyone that I know. One Thanksgiving, I was at Aunt Jean's house, and on her refrigerator was a picture of her and Uncle Joe, her husband. They were in a setting that I did not recognize. They were wearing clothes that I had never seen. They were posing with three completely unfamiliar people. The photo had captured their facial expressions and their body language in a way that was not familiar to me. The whole thing seemed off. It was as if the aunt and uncle that I saw every Sunday while I was growing up were entire strangers to me. I guess I thought that I had seen every single picture that existed of them, and by extension, I guess I assumed that I knew everything that there was to know about them, and that I knew them in their entirety. Well, as obvious as this probably is to most of us, it really didn't strike me in a really meaningful, visceral way until I saw that picture. That we can never, ever truly know another human being. Even those we love, even those we consider ourselves to be very close to, are largely unknown to us. I remember looking at that picture of Aunt Jean and Uncle Joe and thinking, I only know a limited piece of them. I see them once a week or so for a few hours in a family setting. They live whole lives that don't include me. They were alive long before I was, too. So I only know about their past lives from the stories that I've heard. And because I'm only familiar with a little sliver of their entire beings, I can't really ever know what struggles and burdens and pain and angst they may carry with them. I can only surmise what disappointments they may have overcome, what traumas shaped who they became, what wounds motivate their behavior, what limits did their individual experiences place upon them that I don't know about or can't even guess at. Which hopes that they had were dashed, which words crushed them, which moments defined them, who hurt them, who undermined their confidence, who disappointed them, who let them down, what longing lived in them that was perpetually unfulfilled. We never know. Never, never, never. We can't. Each and every human soul is too complex and too battered by the mere experience of living in a harsh world to ever be fully understood. And expecting bruised and flawed human beings to behave perfectly and graciously and generously and justly in every single situation is unfair and unjust, and it's also unwise. I began, after that insight, to think about Aunt Judy for the first time in a long time and what may have motivated her to do the things that she did at the time we were settling my grandmother's estate. So I thought about what I did know, but hadn't stopped to consider before. My father wounded Judy, and he wounded her deeply. And that wound never went away because largely my father wouldn't let it. You see, as often happens in families too, my father did not approve of Judy's choice of a husband. Now, I will say my father was not wrong to have his doubts. Wayne was an alcoholic. He was not good at holding a job. He had an explosive temper, and he had done prison time. It wasn't hard to understand why my father did not want his baby sister to marry him. But Judy chose him, and Judy loved him, and for reasons only Judy understood, that's who she wanted to marry. And if the truth be told, I will say this too, my father's objection always seemed to me to have more to do with the family image than with Judy's well-being. My father was a police officer in a small town, and having his sister married to someone with a well-known rap sheet was an embarrassment. And it was this, by the way, that I always heard when Wayne's name came up. I never heard my father complain that Wayne did not treat his sister well. What I always heard about was what an embarrassment Wayne was to him, what a stain it was on his reputation having Wayne as a brother-in-law was. Wayne was not part of the image that he liked to project. I do know it was not within my purview to have all of the details, but I do know that my father and Judy had a horrible showdown over Wayne, which essentially boiled down to my father vowing to disown Judy if she went through with the marriage. And I know that my father, for the most part, kept that promise. He kind of avoided Judy when he could, and he was indifferent to her when they were together. And I know from what other relatives have told me that Judy never got over this. She never got over the pain of the rejection that she felt from an older brother that she had idolized. So I thought about this too. Judy did not do the Master's in Counseling program at SUNY Brockport, nor did she have any education beyond an LPN course at Auburn Memorial Hospital in the early 1960s. So she had likely not learned the rule that I statements are meant to convey one's feelings and concerns and needs without blaming, shaming, or threatening. It's easy for many of us now to forget that this explosion in self-awareness and effective communication techniques were not a phenomenon familiar to anyone but the educated urban elite until just a few decades ago. So when I thought about it, in the working class, extremely conflict-avoidant family that Judy grew up in during the 1940s and 1950s, a letter like the one I sent her was an attack, an accusation, fighting words, a call to arms. Certainly not a letter to be received as the forthright, heartfelt bridge builder that I had intended it to be. So, then I thought more about it. What else could have been going on that I could not even guess at? Did Judy and my grandmother have a private understanding that she was to keep everything she wanted because she was my grandmother's only living child? And if so, did Judy keep that understanding to herself in an effort to spare us having hurt feelings or in order to spare conflict? Did my grandmother maybe have resentments toward us that no one shared with us? And Judy was doing what she thought was the best thing to honor her mother's wishes. It is true we drifted apart a little bit from my grandmother after my father no longer served as a connection point, and it is true that Grandma Carrie was not happy at all when my mother remarried. So was Aunt Judy maybe keeping a promise to her mother and then trying to shield my sisters and I from pain? Or was Wayne actually running the show unbeknownst to us? Wayne did have a long and well-known history of selling Judy's possessions to buy alcohol. So maybe when no one was looking, did he take the key and did he go and clean out the apartment for the same reason? And then Aunt Judy was embarrassed to tell us that that's what had happened? I didn't think of any of those things at the time. I'll never know for sure. In the same way that I only knew that sliver of Aunt Jean and Uncle Joe's total life, I only knew a speck, a tiny speck of who Judy was. The falling out with my father, which had happened when I was only a year old, combined with my father's early death and my mother's remarriage, created too much distance over too much time. And when Grandma Carrie died, all of the grief and resentment and hurt manifested as a tug of war over $3,000, a bundle of letters, and a set of dime store salt and pepper shakers. As so often happens in families. Donna Morrison Reed, who some of you remember, always said that when that happens at a death, people are fighting over the love that has been lost. But who in this situation could ever say how far back we would have to go to find where the blame lay in all of this? Judy hurt me, whether intentionally or not, and I hurt her back. But was it just the two of us interacting with each other, or were we really merely just playing out small roles in a much bigger story that neither of us really had much of a hand in writing? So, this morning, I told you a very long and a very personal story, but I chose to tell it because I believe it is universally relatable. We all come from families with complicated and at times contentious histories. We have all been hurt and then hurt back in equal measure. And we have all withheld at least one "I'm sorry" at some point in our life because we felt that the other person was not sufficiently contrite. What I came to realize, many years too late, by the way, is that we can always say "I'm sorry," regardless of what led to the division in the first place, because the circumstances are always larger and much more complicated than the people involved. And everyone's feelings are fragile and urgent and valid. We aren't accepting blame when we say we're sorry so much as we are acknowledging the other person's vulnerability and ultimately their humanity. And as obvious and as fundamental as this message may seem, it doesn't take much effort to see that it's worth reminding ourselves in this ever more self-centered and ever more polarized world we are living in. Now, I obviously recognize that there may be an exception for those of us who have been truly violated and abused. But in the overall picture of our lives, nuanced scenarios like the one that I described in my story this morning are far more common, I believe. In 2010, I attended one of those large group personal growth seminars, you know, the ones that you see parodied on sitcoms where you write letters to everyone that you've ever fallen out with and you ask them for forgiveness. Well, after 19 years, I wrote to Aunt Judy. Ironically, it turned out to be the same week that she was awaiting the results of a biopsy, which confirmed terminal cancer. Now, I know this sounds like a cliched story device. If I were writing a drama or a novel, this would be a great contrivance, but this is exactly how it happened. She was, in fact, when she got the letter, too overcome to call me herself, so she had my cousin Debbie call me instead. Mom thinks that it's a bad sign that your letter came while she's waiting for the results, Debbie said. And for the second time in our history together, my reaching out to Aunt Judy had caused pain, even though, again, it was well-intentioned and I wasn't intending to cause pain. So my cousin Debbie called back about a week later to let me know that indeed the diagnosis was terminal. And when Aunt Judy and I finally spoke, neither of us even said, "I'm sorry." I had already said that, I guess, in my letter. And I can't guess at why she didn't say it. But what she did say every time I spoke to her after that was, "I love you." And about 9 months later, I was honored to actually be one of the people that was present when she drew her last breath. And she had specifically asked, she wanted my sister and I to be there. So I don't believe in dwelling on regrets. They serve little purpose and they don't fully honor the totality of who we were in years past. So this morning, when you relate this to your own experience, I encourage you not to focus on the regrets, but just to focus on the joy that you got from whoever it is that you may be able to relate this story to. And that you'll just see them and yourselves in your full, flawed humanity. So I don't believe in dwelling on regrets, but I will always be grateful that I did say, "I'm sorry," before it was too late. please remain standing as we extinguish our chalice flame this morning. Let us read together the words printed on the screen. We extinguish this flame, but we keep its lights in our hearts with its message of love and justice, taking it outside these walls to the world we live in until we are together again. At this time, I would invite those who are joining us from home to turn their screen to gallery view. To pass the peace is a revolutionary act. It means to trust the outsider we fear, to wish well those who have hurt us, and to forgive at last, and most importantly, ourselves. To offer the blessing to those around you is to love your neighbor and yourself, and to be at peace with God. Blessed be. Amen. As we close the service this morning, I invite you to place a hand over your heart. If you are joining us online, I invite you to turn your settings to gallery if you have not done so, and look upon the faces of those here with you. And for those of us in this room, take a moment to look at those of you who are here today. I invite everyone to join us for the refreshment hour afterwards, and let the people of the congregation, both here and at home, say together, Amen.